We need to raise the standard and continue to raise the standard from the ground up.
Your past conditioning, your beliefs, you need to dump that and unlearn it and make room and opportunity for new stuff to come in.
If you're feeling that feeling at all within your gut, you need to go with it.
You have to have those people on your team who are willing to accept the change, because change is frustrating. Welcome back. Another episode of Apps and Asphalt. I'm Hayden. Got Zach with me today.
Hello.
Sorry I did the intro for you there. My bad.
All right, man.
Today, we want to talk about kind of the state of capital projects that we noticed this year, capital expenditure projects. We'll kind of dive in and define those and go over, what we're seeing in our market. It's been extremely competitive just from a, 10,000 foot view, but also want to talk about how we feel you guys should blend these projects in with some of your other jobs that you have going on. Don't be completely reliant on there. And yes, we'll dive in. But first and foremost, let's dive into what is a capital improvement project, and what are some circumstances where you're bidding against some of these these jobs.
You know what? We kind of bucket our groups of projects in a few different areas here, the way I look at things. So we've got reactive maintenance projects, which I would consider crack fill, patching, seal coating, anything that's just kind of reactive maintenance that we need to, or proactive for that matter, but maintenance projects essentially. And then we've got emergency liability projects that spring up. And then we've got capital expenditure projects, which could be, for us, we kind of throw in some of our new construction as well too, which, because it's a type of work, it's heavy work. So we kind of look at our stuff in three different buckets, right? The way I define capital expenditure projects are typically anything that's above and beyond $100,000. These can be large concrete projects. It could be a mill and overlay project. It could be something that an HOA has been planning for the last couple of years.
Yep.
So anytime they're tapping into their reserve or from their reserve study, typically that's a capital expenditure project. So mill and overlay, reconstruction, full depth, all that type of stuff. Larger CapEx projects.
Really the higher dollar value stuff.
You'll see them from box stores come out.
Yep.
You'll see a lot of the mill and overlay projects. Those are all CapEx projects.
Right. And it really just depends on the customer too. Sometimes customers will hire engineering firms to essentially create the scope of work, manage it, go through the whole bidding process. You give their preference on the vendors that they want to go with based on the price, the relationship, whatever. So there's a lot of factors that kind of play into it. But what we noticed this year was a lot of the CapEx projects that were really hard bid tabs that were sent to us. Most of the years we get a good handful of those, and we take they're a good chunk of our schedule for sure.
Yep. I think a lot of companies probably got spoiled during COVID.
Yeah.
Because a lot of businesses were using that time to get CapEx projects going or planned out. And so we've seen a ton of them since COVID. Even after that, it's almost kind of like a little bit of a hot streak. As our economy has kind of cooled down, so has capital expenditures. And this was one of those years where we're like, okay, we have to have at least a 20% growth spurt this year, and it needs to be, top to bottom, from bottom line all the way up to the top line, and make sure that everything is, balancing out. But a lot of projects were coming into bid early on this year.
Yeah.
And what we were realizing, it was a race to the bottom on a lot of it. So.
Yep. And that's, fortunately for us, is we still get a lot of other work and a lot of good customers that are still sending us large scale projects.
Yep.
But, especially for some of these box stores and stuff, we did notice it's a race to the bottom. So at some point in time, it becomes okay, even though it's a good revenue amount, is the logistics, is the margin, does, all your ducks have to literally be in a row to hit, X amount of margin. Is that really worth it versus, a couple other smaller jobs that can break up to give you that same revenue amount, but, better margins? And it's really kind of a balance in deciding what opportunities you do want to get real competitive on versus what ones you don't.
Yep.
Yep.
And I agree 100%. What we noticed early on was, as we were dissecting through some of these projects, and we have good enough relationships that we were getting a second or, even last look on some of them, but some of them we were just waving past because there was no money in them. And so when you start to learn your craft at the level that we've got ours dialed into, and you're realizing like, gosh, we could take this project, but there's no money in it, or there's very little money in it. And honestly, this crew is not only worth this much top line revenue per day, but it equates out to this much gross profit margin that's going in the piggy bank,
Right.
And so, just like you said, it's like we had to get a little creative. Not to say we didn't pick anything up, we did pick up a significant amount, but it also made us realize like, okay, we need to get a little creative and crafty on some things along the way here. And so,
estimating the craftiness even more up front than we already do.
Yep.
Typically we bid, a lot of our jobs competitively, but then we'll really rely on operations to get, we'll stick with the same word, crafty, to make up that extra couple of points. But going into these competitive bids and these competitive CapEx projects, you almost have to show all your cards up front in order just to get it. And I remember there was a couple opportunities where we were like kind of sweating how low the margin was coming up.
Yeah.
And realizing when the results came back that we were still, 40, 50 grand higher than the lowest bid.
Yeah. At which point you as a business owner need to kind of evaluate, because businesses can only take those type of losses or hits for so long before it shows face 6 months down the road, a year down the road. Because, in Colorado and everywhere around the country, you only have so much time to make hay while the weather's there and it's shining. So if companies or your competitors want to spend their time buying up workload, they're going to be washing their hands for probably, the rest of that season on some of that stuff. It won't even really show face until the following season. But you need to educate your customers on, okay, there's probably going to be some corners that are cut at the very least, at the minimum. You got to make sure that these people are still going to be in business the following year to stick to their warranty. But also what we kind of honed in on is just really what made us too, which is like the differentiator for us, what kind of value are we providing our customers and making sure that we go above and beyond. And since we did that, using Spot On Site and everything, all the tools that we've got, it actually increased our closing ratio quite a bit this year as
100%.
well.
Yeah,
right?
It really has. Yeah, and I think, it just depends on kind of the market too, is you get, especially these box stores, I'll use that as an example, they're soliciting them out to, 10 national contractors to bid them. The 10 national contractors are soliciting the RFP out to another 3 to 4.
Yep.
And so you get to a point where you're bidding against guys that you never even heard of. This might be their first year in business and they don't know their cost of business. So they're just throwing a number out there, just, kind of out of their ass. And you're looking at some of these results and being like, holy shit, like how can, some of these companies that are awarding this work to these contractors not do their research on who's actually getting in and doing it? Because
I agree 100%. And at the customer level, how are you not? I get it's easier to buy from a national vendor, providing the national vendor has qualified partners
Right.
to bid the projects. But if they're not keeping a pulse on whoever can bid that down below, it's almost like, for some of the bigger names that we know around our household, it's like, how would you expect to get a good product at that? And so it's caused us to kind of, just look outside of stuff. We've honed in on a lot of maintenance work. We've done we've done a lot of different things, just marketing wise. We've tried a lot of different things, but getting back on the phone and hunting down the ideal clients still seems to be our best bet.
Yeah, what works for us anyways, strictly kind of property management guys, people that you can actually build a relationship, because in a competitive market like this, I think what we realized is, no matter the relationships that we would have with some of these customers that were soliciting out, that were like the GCs of the job, at the end of the day, for whatever reason this year, the relationships kind of got thrown out the window and it was all price driven.
All price driven.
And so that really puts you in kind of a rock and a hard spot of like, okay, well, I guess, the work we've put up front doesn't really matter as much. So, they're just seeing everybody as a number. So game on in that sense. But, I think really it's important to look at the risk versus reward for some of these jobs, because sometimes they can tie your crews up for way too long and can cause your company a lot of headache and heartache just getting some of them produced for, a good revenue number, but you take home pennies compared to what you could have.
Yep.
And, billing's always a little bit slower on some of these jobs because you got to wait for a completion and then you got to submit all your reports. So
talking on GC stuff.
Yeah, kind of GC stuff, which is not all the capital jobs, but a lot of these capital jobs are like that.
Yep.
So just really be smart with some of these opportunities, because you talked about this in one of our early podcasts. Anything that you're estimating is essentially like an investment into the company. So
you're counting on it to hit.
Right.
Yep.
It's like how much money, labor, time, effort do you want to invest for minimal returns just because it has a high dollar value versus what's actually going to move the needle, and that's the bottom line at the end of the day.
Yep.
So it's been pretty eye-opening. There are a couple different companies that run like those models that are just like they're going heavy into CapEx work. Mm-hmm. If you're a subcontract and you want to get into some of that stuff, what kind of advice would you give some of these smaller companies that want to get in with some of these larger companies that do get the chance to bid these projects?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would, number one, take a look at what your operational team looks like, and think about where your strong suit is in your company. If it's, crack fill, seal coating, milling and paving up to a certain amount of tonnage, anything beyond this point is really difficult for us. Figuring out what type of leverage you are comfortable, I guess, just really throwing out there from a labor standpoint, considering you might not get paid, might not see anything for 60 up to 90 days sometimes from the time you first initially start milling to the time you actually get paid, you could be sitting out there for some time. And so I think evaluating these different things and then where your strong suits are, and then getting in with the national contractors and just being very forward and upfront with them. Like, hey, these are our sweet spots. This is where we're going to play ball really well. And, these are the areas that we're not that good at. And I think people respect that. They want to know that and they want to hear that. And so, the more that you kind of just market yourself and get yourself in front of them and let them know, I think the better chances you are of picking some of that work up along the way.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these contractors feel pressured if there's stuff that's added into the bid tab that's maybe outside of your scope. Mm-hmm. So any electrical work, like underground drainage work, like don't feel pressured to say yes to those opportunities, because those could really, really, really hurt you.
Oh yeah.
And we've seen this plenty of times on some jobs that we've said yes to stuff that's outside of our work, and you almost give up control at that point because you don't necessarily know all that you need for that job.
Yep.
You don't know if you have to sub that portion out. You don't know what the other subs are going to be like. You don't know, their turnaround time, their work quality. You don't really know even what to expect as far as work quality, which if you're the awarded contractor could put you into a big pickle as well.
Yep.
So really diving in and seeing that.
That's kind of what we've seen this year for 2024, at least. I think from what we're gathering in our conversations with the clients, 2025 looks really strong, providing presidential election goes a certain
Yeah.
direction. If it doesn't, then we're probably in for a year that's even harder than this year.
Right.
So, we'll kind of see, keep our fingers crossed. But that's kind of what I'm seeing and hearing. What about you?
I think kind of the same thing too. Is they're projecting hopefully a much better year. People are willing to spend a little bit more money, and we always see that every election year. Kind of
Yep.
people hanging on, not really sure what's going to happen, what the future is going to hold. So they tend to hold off and do more maintenance work. But this is a good time of the year to really start prepping for that. For definitely your messaging for sales is like, hey, look. We can start helping out with some budgeting for you guys and really start looking at some projects you might have next year, and maybe start building these plans that could help these your customers out, that build that kind of strong relationship with them.
Totally.
Before it gets into the bid tab next year as well. So
yeah. So
it was a quick down and dirty of the
it
capital
was,
projects.
man. Yeah. It was. That was kind of like skinned it and
just right to it, man.
Yeah.
I love it. Right for the throat. So yeah, we want to talk about a little bit of the trends and stuff that we're seeing too, because I'm sure if we're feeling the squeeze, other contractors are feeling the squeeze in different areas. But
if you're listening to this, just don't be afraid to throw the margin up a little bit. You know, like we're all eating off of out of the same pond, so to speak, in a lot of different ways, and it's like, everyone doesn't need to be so eager to get down to the bottom just to have the, like the trophy of, oh, I got this job. Like,
right.
We're so far past those points. And I feel like a lot of companies, a lot of newer and younger companies tend to do stuff like that.
It's almost like a pride thing.
It is.
In a sense.
It is. And it's just, there's nothing that will throw you out of business faster than something like that as well, too.
Right. You've had that. You've had that with one of your past companies. The customer didn't pay on some CapEx projects and put you in a bad spot.
Yeah, I was 21 and it threw me on my ass. And it was not fun.
Right.
It took a while to climb out of that. So.
Right. And like what you said, too, it's almost like real estate. The more these guys are bidding lower and lower margins on some of these jobs, the more it's driving the price down. So, quality, everything's going to be a domino effect after that. Work quality, contract quality, communication, it's all going to go downhill because you're literally ruining a market of opportunity for the rest of the companies. So
totally.
And it gets a bad reputation too. So I'm curious to see how it's going to almost like reset. I feel like it's almost like it's got its own market trends. Kind of like, the stock market and real estate and those kind of prices and stuff like that. So hopefully it resets, but really keep an eye on like the kind of business that you guys, really excel at and make good money, have good relationships with your customers at,
Smart.
and go almost more in on that.
Yep.
If you're kind of hurting for some work. So.
Yep. Teaming up with another company that say, you're crack fill, seal coating, patching, and you don't do anything mill and overlay wise, just, teaming up with some other companies that could use an extra crack fill, seal coat crew, and, you can refer your stuff off as well too. But, those are just different ways that you can, kind of drum up work for yourself. So.
100%. Well, we'll end there. That was another episode of Apps and Asphalt Podcast. We'll see you guys here in the next couple of weeks. Thank you.